Well, I think that over the years, I think it's a combination of the real world aspects of, you know, being used to living in a certain way. Like, you know, the artist Sheila Chandra?
Yes, love her.
So she put out a book recently called How to Live Like an Artist.
Yeah.
For during this period, you know, for regular people. And also, I don't feel a desperation, and I'm grateful for that.
Right.
You know, but it's very interesting to observe this thing that's going on a global level.
Right.
To see how, I mean, there's no, although wealthy people are flying away to their summer houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Bringing their stuff to small towns that wish they weren't there. You know, the rich get richer and all that. So on the other hand, it's fascinating to observe countries and people in the countries and see how they are dealing with it. One of the worst being this country and the division that is sowed. And, you know, it's very interesting to see that some people want to come together and do the right thing. It's not like a common cold. So this whole tyranny, you know, freedom tyranny thing is such a disillusionment, you know, it's such a lie. It's really selfishness, you know, and we have a president that is just fueling those fires, and refusing to take responsibility for anything. And I'm afraid that what's going on now is everybody's reopening, but how can you reopen a restaurant? How can you reopen a tattoo shop, you know, or a barber shop? I mean, I don't know. You know, we will see.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But I think on a larger level, it's a incredible lesson and an opportunity for us as human beings on the planet, if we could only see it, that we are literally one.
Yeah. This is it.
This is it. Taipei right away shut everything down, test everybody, whether they showed signs or not.
Right.
And they got it under control.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I'm an advocate of that. But I love what you say about that. It reminds us that we're one. And I think we're looking at the air cleaning up and the water. And
isn't that amazing to see Venice, to see what are the other cities that are like the cities in China as well?
Yeah.
And India. That's
Himalayas.
amazing.
Yeah. No, it's
in a short period of time too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in 2 months. I mean, there's dolphins and jellyfish in the canals of Venice.
That's right. No, it's amazing. Are we making the progress? I mean, there's steps forward and there's steps back. What's your kind of big picture feeling on that, our trajectory?
I think that there's very strong and building strains of, you know, a sort of frequency or vibration in people that has risen. But I also feel that we aren't there yet. Boy, we aren't there yet. I mean, this is a perfect example of it. This is the perfect example. And the place where we live, I see it just getting more and more divisive.
Right.
And, you know, so, I mean, even the Woodstock thing, even that Woodstock generation, I'll admit that although I got spiritual, I got a spiritual teacher and all that, I never considered myself a real hippie. You know? So, I mean, even the thing at Woodstock, that, you know, we did it, man, we did it. You know, I really didn't buy into that.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, you know, it's, I get it. It's like, wow, you know, we showed the world we can get together with these amount of people and have a peaceful 3 days here, which could, nowadays, I don't think you can do that, you know?
The Klaus Schulze records, or your own records like Stiletto, you always play to the song, and you never overplay. And I wanted you to maybe share with us, because the very first thing people saw is your drum solo. I mean, that's the big, the thing that got on the news and all that, and people watch it. Talk to me about that, because I think that solo, again, shows us who you are in so many ways. So tell me about that.
Well, every time I look at it, my reaction is, what were you thinking? You know, you got 500,000 people here. Keep the damn groove going.
Right.
You know, but no, it felt right to do that. I mean, every one of those solos every night was improvised.
Sure.
So, but it felt right. It felt right. Like, let's bring it down. I still had a pulse going on the hi-hat or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but I brought the dynamics down, and I didn't plan on it. And later, when I looked at it, it drove me crazy. I mean, really, I can't listen to that solo. I can look at it.
Yeah.
And I get it. When I look at it, I say, it's a young kid, and there's 500,000 people, and he's playing with this band. Like, how the hell do you get to play with these guys? You know?
Right.
And the energy is there. The energy is so strong, and there's so much joy in it.
Yeah.
And so I understand it. If I listen to just the audio of the solo, I'm not so impressed. But the whole package, I do. I completely get it. You know,
sure.
from standing out, and it's not even just me, just observing the whole energy. Right. I get it. So, I mean, I don't know. I just did that. But people call me, even I'm doing something now with 5 drummers where we're talking about that period precisely.
Yeah.
And I'm doing like these Zoom things 3 times a week.
Right.
With drummers that we're talking about that period of time in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And it's David Garibaldi from Tower of Power.
Great.
Gregorico from Sly and the Family Stone.
That's great.
Mike Clark from Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters.
Yeah.
And Lenny White, who, the next day after Woodstock, was in the studio with Miles Davis recording Bitches Brew.
Right.
Day after.
It's amazing.
And so we're talking about that Big Bang thing, what happened in a musical sense. And we're doing it 3 times a week, and we're hoping to do something with it.
Right.
Was this cross-pollination of thought, and it came out of the movement, whatever that frequency was, that vibration at the time.
Right.
And everybody was being influenced by everybody, and that was a good thing.
Yeah.
And it should be like that with the peoples of the world.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to share culture, to share music, to share food, and I don't know what this rising force of fear of that is that's going on in the world, not just in America.
Yes, there's elements of that. Absolutely. We know that there's positivity too, and a lot of places are coming together, and especially places like South America and Africa and India. You have these wonderful democratizing things happening, and artists finally can reach the rest of the world.
That's another aspect of this whole thing that's going on, that we're forced to be home, and
right.
Creative people are literally being forced to figure out a way to reach people.
Yes.
And what better way but the internet?
Yeah.
So we're going to have to step up and get creative, and people are doing amazing things.
Yeah.
You know?
The Bay Area thing, of course, we know your love for Lenny and Elvin Jones, Jack DeJohnette. Wow, so many people that are not from the Bay Area. Roy Haynes, 2 other Bay Area guys, someone like Prairie Prince and Terry Bozzio. Because I hear, were you a Tubes fan? I hear a little bit of a Tubes universe. Maybe they stole from Automatic Man. I don't know, but some of that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Interesting. I was certainly aware of the Tubes, and they were something really different. I didn't consider them my cup of tea or anything, but I was always a big fan of Prairie Prince. In fact, he came up in our conversation the other day with the 5 guys.
Yeah.
because apparently Neil Schon from Journey, that was the drummer he always wanted.
Yeah, he was the original
for Journey, and it never worked out. But who was the other? Terry Bozzio.
Terry, because both guys, you've played with a lot of the same people, or a few of the same people.
Yeah. So Terry, also he was one of the early drummers with Azteca, and Lenny White stepped into that situation as well. Yeah. And then I've always loved Terry because he's so adventurous, you know, and I appreciate those kind of people just in general, you know, and musicians that are, you know, not stuck in their ways, but but walk the earth unapologetically. Let's put it that way, you know, like our friend David Torn, you know.
You became a fan of Stomu Yamashta, and then you sought him out and you met him and all that. So to watch the combination of stuff that Go had with people that there's no way that you would expect them to be in the same room. Al Di Meola, Winwood, you, there he is, yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that thread, because I see that thread still going to today with your work.
Right. It's true. It's true. Even with the album that I have coming out, it's really coming from two sources: Stomu Yamashta and Mickey Hart, because a lot of the people Mickey has worked with, like Olatunji and Ayrton and Zakir, they're on this new record of mine.
Great.
So since Woodstock and this song Soul Sacrifice, I was obliged to play a drum solo every night. So of course I studied all the jazz guys.
Right.
You know? But then I started looking for outside resources that were not of that world. And I was in a record store in Berkeley, I think Leopold's on Telegraph Avenue, famous record store. And I heard this music playing, drumming music. And they had the gatefold displayed. And it was this Japanese guy with a timpani stick in his mouth and hair halfway down his back, leaping in midair on a stage full of drums and percussion. And I was just, it was one of those connections just in that photo.
Sure.
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
And so I bought everything they had on him, and I, you know, immersed myself, and I saw that, man, you know, he was doing stuff like throwing metal at a wall, and it was called Prison Song. Okay. And it was just, he was theatrical as well, you know, in his music. I learned a lot about him, and then I pursued him.
Right. That's a great story.
I mean, I pursued him for half a year, and at the end of a 250-day tour, I finally met him in a hotel in Rome.
Right.
And I knocked on his door, and, you know, he was a short guy with the stature of a 7-foot tall man. And he's like, hello, you know, very, you know, this very, well, you know, a lot of stature. And by an hour later, we were both rolling on the floor, like laughing, talking about music, and we were just friends. And I wanted to do avant-garde percussion with him.
Right.
And he told me, I'm putting together a pop thing with Steve Winwood and this guy named Klaus Schulze, who I had never heard of.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when I went to the rehearsals and saw Klaus and heard him, I couldn't believe it. Yeah. This is a whole nother universe.
Yeah.
You know? And so first you have Stomu, who I learned so much from. For instance, one of the main things I learned from Stomu is if you do interesting things, and by the way, he left a very successful classical music career to start an avant-garde theater troupe.
Right.
Called Red Buddha Theater.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just was fascinated with a guy like him. And I learned that if you do really interesting things, you attract really interesting people into your life. You
Fantastic.
know?
What a thing.
Film directors and the Japanese clothing designers, and I was like, this is really like so sophisticated and cultural, and it was outside of the hippie world and outside of the jazz world and outside of all those worlds that that one has a tendency to get caught up in and never leave.
You've been part of truly the expansion and invention of this new type of music, but you guys found a way to just pull it all together and get on the radio with it. So you've been part of groove-oriented music between that and your solo things and a lot of the jazz you played, like Spellbinder. So talk to us a little bit about how how you got attracted to that sort of sound, because Transfer Station Blue, those kind of things, they're beautiful, and you find a way to work around the clock. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, I was never really a studio drummer, and those people know how to play to a click. Mm-hmm. And I didn't learn how to do that until many years later, like way past even Klaus. But after my experience with Stomu Yamashta on Go, which included Al Di Meola and Pat Thrall, as well as, of course, Steve Winwood, who, I mean, that was unbelievable experience. And then for Klaus Schulze to come into my world was a big thing, just anybody that did that. And so I wanted to do more with him after Go. Mm-hmm. And I flew over several times to his place. But one of the things that did it was he had a record called X.
Yes.
Right? A big record for him, like a double record. And oh man, and those sequencers.
Yeah.
Those Moog sequencers in that sound.
Love it.
Drove me crazy. And the rhythm of it. And it wasn't rigid to me. And but then every time the drummer came in, it drove me crazy, because it felt like I wanted to hear the drums like with the sequencers, like tight.
Yeah, right, right.
And so I just called him up and I said, let me come over so I can play to your sequencers and make it how I think it should be,
Sure.
And so we did the Transfer Station Blue, and my brother Kevin came, and I ended up doing other records with sure. Klaus under his Von Fried name.
Richard, yeah.
Like but that got me into the sequencers, and right. I'm doing it again now on a project with Patrick Gleason, as you know.
That's a great,
and Sam Morrison, and I love playing to the click with it,
Right.
Like I know he did a gig in New York with Sam Morrison and Patrick, and I wasn't. Lenny White played drums.
Right.
And Lenny did not play to a click, and I have to ask him about that. But to me, the beauty and the fun of it is like having that click, that pulse, while the sequencers are pulsing,
Right.
There's a joy in that. I found that it frees you up in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can float on that, or you can, hook right on top of it, or you can throw like a stone, a light rock on a river, and watch it bounce, So I'm attracted to those things. That's why I was attracted to drum and bass in the 80s. And, I thought, man, I mean, this stuff, every time I tried to play it, I sounded like fast James Brown. And I never.
Right.
So I started taking lessons in the 80s from KJ Saka.
Okay.
Who now is like become one of the guys, right? I never got it.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, David Garibaldi used to live with me, and I never got that either. But
the Tower Power group.
Tower Power, yeah. I mean, he created a whole language in himself. Right. But anyway, I've loved electronic music since I invested in a company in 1973 called Impact Electronic Drums.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
And so they're featured a little bit on Automatic Man.
Right.
In which was 76.
Yeah.
And Bill Bruford used to come down and look at my rack all the time.
Oh.
Basin Street and stuff. Then he got all the credit for electronics.
Yeah, a few years later. Well, you know, that's part of all this is getting some history out there. And I've read a few years ago, you said you still had the Impact stuff and it still works. Is that still true?
What I did was I donated it to the Percussion Art Society.
Oh, okay.
The Percussion Art Museum in Kansas or something like that.
Okay.
So at least it's not sitting in storage and it's in a place, and that's better. Yeah.
That's.
I think the Moog stuff on the iPad is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Wow, the Animoog, I have that, and the yes, it really is. It really is incredible.
And the chord, like I've got the analog here, the chord, the wave station, the rack.
Oh yeah,
I love that.
In an app form, it's an app.
No, this one is. I've got the actual.
The
hardware.
Yeah.
But the chord stuff on the apps are unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Talk to us a little bit then about where that thread is right now. We know that Spellbinder, a couple great records that are out there people should check out. Talk a little bit about your upcoming record that you're working on with all the percussionists, and also what's happening right now for you.
Right. Okay, so this record that I just finished, I've been working on it literally for 20 years, you know? Yeah.
That's great.
It's not great.
It could go either way there.
Or something, but I've got an issue, you know, completing things. So when you talk about right now, what I'm doing is trying to complete these things that I've been sitting on for 20 years.
Yes, okay.
Some of them are 20 years. Drums of Compassion is one of them. It's like Jeff Grinke is the synthesis on this record. Okay. And he's not a sequencer guy. He's a sound designer guy.
Great.
And I started the record with him, and where I'm standing up playing 16 drums in a semicircle, toms, like Stomu Yamashta did.
Right.
And I've got copies of that, but it sounded too new agey or something like that. So I was fortunate enough to have some great percussionists and who are friends as well, like Ayrto and Zakir and well, now Pete Lockett as well is on there, the English percussionist. There's a track with Amon Tobin on it, who's
oh wow, love him.
Wouldn't seem like would be right, but it really fits, you know.
It works, yeah.
So anyway, I've got the artwork done. I need some a few, like, sign off some releases on a couple of pieces, and that's done and ready to go out.
Okay.
The other project is Elvin Jones, who became a dear friend, and I mistakenly, you know, I said that there should be a book out on him like 20 years ago, and he said, well, why don't you do it? Yeah. And I naively said okay, and here it is 20 years later, and there's still nothing out. It's not going to be the book that should be written. I'm not a biographer.
Okay.
But I did spend like 10 days with him in Greece with his wife. I interviewed him every night.
Wow.
I went with him to his hometown. I've got tons of stuff. I've got 2 nights of footage that I paid for and filmed at Jazz Alley.
Yeah.
I've got filmed interviews. And so, along with Rob Wallace of Hudson Music, I'm now compiling, going through everything and finding every material I have, and we're going to see what we can do with it.
Great.
So let's wrap up some of this past stuff and psychically and spiritually make room for the new stuff.
I love it. And,
you know?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, it drives me crazy. I don't have my electronics set up now. I'm doing a lot of stuff with the sensory percussion, which are incredible sensors. They're not pads for drums. And
so you attach them to standard drums, or
you attach them. I'll show you. Like this is the sensor.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing mostly sensory percussion and alternate mode. Who made the original Cat, and they have some new stuff out that is really amazing. So
great.
That and the apps on the iPad.
Great.
And I can trigger those through any of those as well.
Great.
And now the trick is and so I've recorded a bunch of stuff, and now what I do is I record everything at once. I'm just improvising, and then I go back and I edit it,
right,
and I find the good stuff, and then I start shipping it out to some other people and see what can you put on this, and
great,
that kind of thing. So we're collaborating in that way. And the next trick would be to combine the electronics with the acoustic.
Right.
And so I'm a little bit of a, what do you call it? You know, like I've got the acoustics set up now, and over here will be the electronics, but I want to combine them.
Right.
So I want to make a really nice combination of all the things that I like, the feels that I like, and ideally I'd like to do a solo show. You know,
I love it. A hybrid kind of a hybrid percussion thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, well, this is great. There's a lot of things for people to look forward to. And michaelshrieve.com, of course, that's where people should find stuff. And all these things are, that's exciting. And Spellbinder, I mean, obviously no one's playing gigs, but that's going to be active later this year, we hope?
We did one gig this year, and I have not been so active with that. For 4 years, we did like a weekly thing at a place in Seattle. That was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then we never really toured it, and my mind I'm a little ADD, so I get distracted, and I want to get into I wanted to get back into the electronics. I wanted to try to learn software. I'm working on Ableton, and I'm working on Studio One simultaneously because they're so different.
Sure.
But I really want to do Ableton because so many of the artists globally, even like visual artists and dance and this, they work from that platform.
Right.
And so it's like a language. I really want, and Patrick Gleason is using it too.
Sure.
A lot of people I know. So I'm trying to learn that, and
that's great. I mean, so everyone knows Santana. You work with one of the greatest, most creative guitarists in the world, and the history is there. As we said, we're not going to spend too much time with that because you've done 1,000 interviews about that. But you have Carlos Santana. You've worked with, Al DeMeola, Steve Winwood, who's a wonderful guitarist, David Torn, Andy Summers, Shawn Lane, all these wonderful people who actually each in their own right stands alone. Bill Frisell.
Yeah. And now I'm working with a new one that I'm really excited about. After let's say that period of Santana, when Carlos has his own voice, but then Neil Schon came into that, and Neil represents like the English side of, like Clapton, Peter Green, those guys. And Greg Raleigh wanted that aspect in the band. Like, of course, Carlos is Carlos, but Greg was a rocker. And so when we heard Neil at a club when he was 16, Greg had the audacity to like push for getting another guitar player in the band with Carlos.
Right.
and Carlos graciously said okay. And so, and that's a certain type of playing. And so when I was putting Automatic Man together, the vision of that was like serious funk rock,
Right.
Heavy on the groove, heavy on the composition, but like, the only comparable thing at the time was Power Station, I think, for that kind of heavy funk. But Pat Thrall was unbelievably an exceptional at that stuff, but very much innovative. For instance, later on, when you heard U2 and you heard the Edge playing that stuff, Pat was doing that in '76. All the echo and the, you know,
Echoes, yeah.
yeah, and really creating parts with that. Yeah, Al Di Meola, of course. I mean, that was there because I knew him from Return to Forever, and
Right.
my friend Lenny was 20, and he was probably 19 when they first came over to my house. But then I started hearing, when I lived in New York, both David Torn and Bill Frisell. And I fell in love with both of them. And, you know, I ended up doing a record with Bill because he moved to Seattle.
Right.
But David, I don't think we've done enough yet. I really don't, you
That's
know.
good to hear. Yes, please,
And
more.
he always felt like a deep soul brother to me because, again, I love these people that walk unapologetically, and Frisell's the same way.
Right.
You know?
Oh.
So Shawn Lane is genius, and Jonas Hellborg turned me on to him. And Jonas, I met while going to Sweden to work with a piano player named Michael Smith. And this guy met me at the airport and took me on a boat to another part. And I thought he was like, you know, a roadie. And that turned out to be Jonas, like a really young Jonas. And Jonas was like genius as well.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I have these relationships with these people that are really special, you know, and they grow like they grow. And it's a beautiful thing. The latest guitar player I did a couple of dates with last year in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and we're going to do a tour, hopefully, God willing, in November of Europe, to like 10 dates.
Oh, nice.
And I found him on a Sunday morning, sitting in bed with my wife, having coffee and just perusing YouTube. And I saw this guy playing on the street corners, different places in Europe. Wow. And there were literally hundreds of people, you know, watching him.
Yeah.
And, you know, he looked like a, you know, central casting gypsy, you know.
Okay.
But I loved what he was playing. It was like Spanish, but not, you know, it touched all that Spanish hard stuff that I love. But it was not strict flamenco or anything like that. But he told a story. Again, I pursued him, you know, for quite a while. And I did the same thing with, what's her name, the percussionist as well.
Evelyn Glennie, or no?
I pursued her like crazy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Tried to get her on Drums of Compassion, and I came
great.
this close, and it didn't happen.
Okay.
But I mean, I courted her. I flew down to San Francisco. You know, it's like, anyway. So this man's name is Estas Tone, and
okay, great. That's
yeah. So when I first saw him, he was just playing on the streets everywhere in the world.
Right.
From New York City to Mill Valley, all of Mexico, everywhere. When I finally touched base with him, some years later, he was now selling out concert halls throughout Europe.
Wow, wow.
And he's had this beautiful presence, and he's got his own thing, you know.
Yeah.
And he's a seriously spiritual vibe,
right?
Like moments of silence and this, and he sets the air and the tone, and it's very special. So when he was coming to America, he played at the Opera House here in Seattle, and we arranged to meet the night before, and we had a really wonderful dinner with his crew and myself. He's got, you know, 3 or 4 people with him, and they just do everything well. And we played at one of the halls at the Opera House, and I came in about midway through, and we didn't rehearse or anything. We just did a sound check. And it was magical from the first note on. Right. I knew it was going to be like that. I just knew it. And rhythmically and, you know, melodically. And we were all really happy that it worked out because we liked each other so much. So they invited me to come to end his European tour and play in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and it was wonderful. And so I'm actually working on something that we did then, and hopefully we'll be able to play again together. So
this year. Oh, that's great. So that's great, man, that there's so many pathways right now to.
Yeah, there are.
I love it.
Things to complete and things to look forward to.
This is what you've done. From the time that the world met you, there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of styles, a lot of energy, and it's really wonderful to see. 50 years on, you're pushing that envelope. You're still looking. You're still,
I think that's the fun thing to do, And as musicians, I think what we lose track of, I know I do for myself, that in the beginning we were fans of music.
Right.
And so I don't want to get stuck in some way. Part of the joy of music for me is discovering new music.
Right.
And it's like when you mentioned doing something with Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Right.
I've been a fan of Sakamoto's forever.
Yeah.
And even now, I've got a whole playlist. Well, I'm a huge fan of that. The last thing he did, the Relevant, the Relevant.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
And
yeah,
also
that's
playlist that he put together for the restaurant in New York. Beautiful.
Wonderful.
And a great story too.
Yeah. And have you worked with Ryuichi ever? Or
yes.
Yeah.
I went over to Japan for a 3-month tour.
Wow.
And I got fired.
Okay.
You let me
go. Wow.
After like a week of rehearsals, and I was working really hard on this stuff. And I'm not one to blame other people, but I thought I was really doing it. And the band, a bunch of New Yorkers, they had a friend of theirs they wanted in the band. And I think they kept pushing for this thing. And Ryuichi, it's an interesting story because it never happened to me before. Ryuichi never came to me. His assistant came to me.
Right.
And he said, I'm sorry that Sakamoto-san wants to try another drummer. And he said, your time is not right, And I said, that's interesting, It's interesting because it sounds good to me, and I'm working harder on this music than any of the other guys that are in the band. They're out partying at night, and I'm in a hotel working. And then he said, this has happened before with Sakamoto-san. It happened with Omar Hakim, and it happened with Andy Newmark, and it happened. And I said, okay, never mind.
Right.
If they said Sakamoto can hear if the drum machine is off.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, well, okay. I'm not going to argue with you because a drum machine doesn't go off.
Right. But if you hear that,
just pay me for the 3 months and I'll leave. And so I went down to the hotel and I got out, and who was standing there but Steve Gadd.
Wow.
And he said, Mike, how you doing? I said, man, do you have a second? Because I was like, I've never been fired before.
Right.
And I told him what happened, and he said, only one thing I can tell you, and it's happened to me too. Fuck it.
That's great. Zen in Japan, Zen words from the sensei, Steve Gadd. That's great, man. What a great story. Oh boy.
I'm still a fan. I consider him to be, one of the major talents of this century, and that was my experience, and that's part of life, So that's the way it is,
Yeah.
Nord drum, yeah, those are really high quality.
Really
I don't
good.
have Nord drum, and I've never used them, but I know that they're really high quality.
Yeah, it's a full-on synthesizer that lets you actually create sounds from scratch. And I think when it came out, a lot of drummers, as you would know, were just looking for toms, kick drum, and a snare. I
don't want that from my
exactly. I know.
I can do drums with that.
Thank you.
what I want is to play melodies and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
One band I want to ask you about, because they're kind of like a combination of Santana and a bunch of the stuff you did later. Mars Volta, because they always have a wonderful drummer, and it's kind of, tell me.
I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they always have unbelievable drummers.
Yeah.
You know, I could never play in that band. I'm not that kind of drummer.
Right.
And I'm less and less that kind of drummer as I get older, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for a identity for myself as I get older, like, because physically stuff's happening with my hands, and that's also why I want to learn the software more,
right,
so I can make music.
Sure.
And I'll always have the rhythm inside me, and I don't really feel the need to have to, you know, I don't have that thing, like,
great,
you know, it's just, I want to make music, and I'm anxious to learn the tools. Like, I just got this software the other day. Oh, what's it called? It's drum software, but it's not like anything I've ever seen before. And it's just, the sounds are unbelievable. And so I don't really, but if I'm going to do it, I've never been a heavy drummer anyway. Like,
right,
even doing this Santana reunion thing we did 4 years ago, the stuff is so loud. It's like, it takes the fun away for me, you know?
okay. Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to have, I like a Brian Blade touch, you know?
Sure, nuance. Yeah.
Yeah, nuance and stuff like that. He reminds me of Stomu Yamashta.
Right.
Like, in
That makes sense.
his expression and it's his heart, you know?
Yeah.
And so I like that energy, and I like to take that kind of energy, which I relate to, into any kind of music that I want to make, you know?
Right.
So you don't have to play so hard.
No,
you know?
no, of course.
You can still make beautiful drum music, which means that I'm not for every band or every, like Mars Volta. And that kind of athletic music, in some ways I'm attracted to, like, for instance, playing with Shawn Lane and Jonas.
Right. I was going to just say that. Two Doors. Yeah.
Shawn is just unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable.
It's in a way, did he push you? Because I was going to say, on Two Doors, it's one of my favorite things you did. And it's a different Michael Shrieve. I mean, you are going for it.
I'm telling you, they were waiting for me. You know what I mean? I was always like, okay, guys, you go away. Let me work on it.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. I mean, they really
pushed you. That pushed you.
You know, they're both into Pakistani music and Indian music.
Oh,
and
yes.
You know,
all that polyrhythmic. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I needed to catch up with them.
Yeah.
And I was always like 2 steps behind.
Sure.
I'm proud of the record we made, you know, so.
It's incredible, man. But that's one I'm going to highlight, because I really think it's one of, of the many peaks that you've had. It's one of the ones where, wow, it's a whole other side here of Michael.
Yeah. So one guitar player we didn't talk about is the record I did with Jonas Hellborg and Buckethead.
I know there's so many records, man, and believe me, I'm trying to keep this tight and short. But I love that. No, but that's a great record. I love that record too. And
it's kind of Jonas is the impetus for all this stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when they put me with, I was supposed to do a tour with David Fruzinski.
Good friend of mine. Love him.
Really?
Oh yeah, we've done some playing together, and he's opened my band a lot. Yeah, I love Dave.
And had this torsos and all that.
Sure.
And I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah.
And then this thing came along with Jonas and Shawn, and I felt terrible for years, and I said, I'm going to do this instead. I really feel like I need to do this.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until years later he was in town playing with Jack G. Jeanette, and I went backstage and I apologized. I said, I'm so, he was like, what? You know?
But I love that you said that you're doing the same thing, with the Elvin book, where you interviewed him and you're being scholarly about, you want to pull it together. And so
with the 5 drummers, with those guys, we're doing this 3 times a week and compiling content.
Love it. No, because it's important to for the pedagogy, for the next generation, for the musicology side. And I love that that's obviously important to you. Quick, funny Buckethead story. So we play this show, we open for Buckethead, and it's really out there, samples and all this shit. So we're done, and we're running backstage, taking our stuff and just dropping it on the ground, that vibe. And there he is, just calmly standing, he's arranging his, he's got his Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket and all that. And Buckethead turns to us and says, "That was really weird."
That's saying something, huh?
And we're going like, so we put that on our press release for years, because we were like, oh my God, Buckethead thought we were weird. Like, so,
I'm going to tell you my little Buckethead story.
Please.
When I did the record with Jonas, we did it without Buckethead.
Okay.
Buckethead came in later, so I'd never met him.
Oh, okay. I see.
We were in the same room. So Jonas created these tracks, and he created the tracks is really smart. He said, just play stuff that you love to play.
Right.
And he'd write a tune to it. So it's kind of that way I sound good and everything.
Right.
Years later, Bucket came through Seattle, and I went to see him. He was with Brain and the band.
Right.
I went back to meet him afterwards, and he was very kind and, shook my hand like barely, and he loved the record and just like that. He never took the Kentucky Fried Chicken thing off the whole time we talked.
You're kidding me.
Backstage.
I was going to say, was this backstage? Wow. So you'd pass him on the street tomorrow?
I would.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, now that's some commitment.
That's heavy, bro. He played on a record with you. And that's a great story. That's
I mean, I wasn't offended or anything, It's like, okay, you're Buckethead,
That's his scenario. That's it, man. That's Mike Dillon. You had that record with Skerik and with the pyramid on the front of it. I forget.
Yeah.
But do you know Mike has just started getting into electronics?
Oh wow.
Yeah. So this is game on.
What's he doing?
Well, and it's funny because I toured with him a couple of times, and I had electronics, and he's always like, "Yeah, man, that's cool, but not my world." So he just got a Behringer DeepMind 12. That's that synth.
That's unbelievable synth. I mean, I saw that at NAMM a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow, here it is.
Very good, affordable, polyphonic. The point being that a guy who really was not interested in that area for a long time for himself, he's just got into it last year, and he's been doing some live streams and stuff. And
is he?
It opens up a whole door, because now he's stepped in your direction of like, wait a minute, so I can play envelopes, and I can,
Yeah, he's incredible. I haven't seen him in 10 years at least.
Oh, that's too long. Well, I'll tell him you said hi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for your time.
Send me music anytime, any music recommendations.
I will.
Okay, buddy. Take good care.
You too. Thank you.